Well, hello, Northstar Church. How are y'all doing today? Well, it sounds like the coffee hasn't quite kicked in yet, so I'm going to ask that question one more time. Good morning, Northstar. How are you guys doing today? Yes, I welcome you to Northstar Church as we get ready to dive into week 4 of the current series that we've been in over the last month entitled Turning Setbacks into Comebacks. Let me ask you, how many of y'all found this series helpful? Anybody found it helpful? Has anybody experienced any setbacks in your life, and this message or this series has helped you navigate through some of those things? Let me ask you another question. How many of you have ever experienced a setback in life that was caused by someone else? Anyone? Anyone? Don't nudge the person next to you. Maybe you were on the way to church today and you got caught behind someone that had no clue how to drive. They didn't know how to use a blinker. They were driving under the speed limit. How many of y'all get aggravated at that driver? Anyone in the room, anyone online get aggravated at the driver that does that? A lot of times we experience setbacks in life because of other people. And that's what I want to talk about today. How do we process that? What do we do when we experience setbacks because of other people? Because here's what we know. What we know is that we're all broken. We're all really messed up, right? Like, just turn to your neighbor and say, "You're really messed up." Turn back and say, "No, you're really messed up." If you're watching online, just yell across the house, "You guys are messed up." And they're going to wonder why you're yelling, and then you're just going to have to tell them to come on and watch Northstar online with you today. We're all messed up people, right? We're all very messed up people. But here's the reality of it. Although we know that we're messed up, it still hurts when someone else who's messed up makes a mistake, makes a bad decision, makes a bad choice, and it's at our expense. And we experience a setback because of that. And here's some of the questions that we begin to ask ourselves. When that happens, we begin to wonder, where is God in all this? Where is God when I experience a setback? Where is God when someone else fails me? Where is God in the moments when someone uses me for their personal gain, regardless of how it affects me? Where is God at when maybe an older, prominent member of the family passes away, and a relative, out of their greed, they swindle me out of my part of the inheritance? Where is God when that happens? Maybe that's never happened to you. Where is God when we're rejected and mistreated by people that we thought really genuinely loved us and cared about us? Where is God when that happens to us? Where is God in the moments when we are hurt and crushed the most by other people? That's the kind of questions that those of us who are followers of Jesus ask. But maybe there are some of you here in the room today who are not a follower of Jesus, and you would not consider yourself a Christian, or maybe you're watching online today and you don't consider yourself a follower of Christ. You guys ask the same questions. You just word it a little bit differently, because it's things like this that give all the more reason to doubt the existence of God. And so when you guys ask the questions, you ask the same questions. You're wanting to know the same thing. You just word it a little bit differently. You might say something like this: if God were real, He would be there for me and stand up for me when others make decisions to hurt me and to abuse me. If God were real, like, He would be there and stand up for me when some greedy person in my family swindles me out of a portion of my inheritance or whatever it may be. If God were real, He would not allow the things that people do to me to be done to me. If God were real, He wouldn't stand by and let people that I thought genuinely loved and cared about me do things that hurt me and harm me and break me. Where is God and all this? Whether you're a believer in Jesus or whether you're not a believer in Jesus, we're all asking the same question. Where's God when things like this happen? And if I could dig just a little bit deeper into that question, I think here's what we really want to know and what we're really asking, and that is this: can God really be trusted? Like, can He really be trusted in these moments when I'm hurt by other people, in these moments when I'm caused just huge, monumental setbacks in my life because of what other people have done, because of decisions that other people have made? And I would love to try to, just for a couple of moments today, try to answer that question by looking at a story that we find in the Old Testament. And this story was recorded by a man by the name of Moses. And in this particular story, there's a young individual that finds himself dealing with setback after setback after setback after setback. And Moses gives us all the minute details of this individual's setbacks just over and over and over and over, not by people like way out there, but by people in his own family. And he's hurt, and he's crushed, and he's let down, and he's used for their gain, regardless of what it means to him. He's completely sold out for money. Like just over and over and over and over, things are happening to him. And then the author does something just extremely remarkable and gives us just a completely different glimpse and picture. Although he zooms in really close and gives us all the different examples of the setbacks that this individual went through, he then zooms out to like this 30,000-foot perspective and gives us the beginning to end view. And when he gives us that view, all of a sudden, that whole question of where is God in all this, all of a sudden we see God's hand at work, God's power at work, God's sovereignty at work every step of the way, and how God was able to take what this individual probably saw and what you and I see in our lives as major setbacks. He was able to paint the picture and show that setbacks in our lives, specifically those caused by other people, can be used as stepping stones for those who trust God. That's your bottom line today. If you're taking message notes, your bottom line is this: setbacks are stepping stones if we trust God. Setbacks are stepping stones if we trust God. This individual, his name was Joseph. Many of y'all have heard of Joseph, not Joseph, the father or the stepfather of Jesus, but Joseph in the Old Testament, one of 12 siblings. How many of y'all have kids in the room? Could you imagine having 12? I mean, this is just crazy. How many of y'all were the favorite sibling in your family? Do I have anybody who was the favorite? Do I have anybody who was not the favorite? And you're still a little bitter about that. Well, Joseph was the favorite, okay? He was the favorite for a very specific reason, and I wish I had time to dive into the details of why Joseph was the favorite, but just to give you a little bit of a snapshot, Joseph's dad was a man by the name of Jacob. And Jacob fell head over heels in love with this girl named Rachel, and he wanted to marry her. He goes to Rachel's dad, whose name was Laban. I'm going to move kind of fast through this, so y'all forgive me if you can't keep up. But he goes to Laban, I want to marry your daughter. I love her. We want to spend the rest of our lives together. Laban says, work for me for 7 years, and then you can have my daughter's hand in marriage. How many of you guys would have given up at that point? Work for 7 years for me, and I'll give you my daughter. He works 7 years. Comes to the day of the marriage. It's a beautiful ceremony. They get to the inner bedroom, the chamber. He's about to consummate the marriage. For those of you that have kids in the room, you can explain to them what that means later. He goes to consummate the marriage. He lifts the veil to kiss his bride, and it's not Rachel. It's Rachel's older, uglier, cross-eyed sister, Leah. And he realized that he has been tricked. And this is not the girl that I love. And he goes back to Laban and says, what did you do? You tricked me. I'm in love with Rachel. I'm not in love with Leah. And now I'm married to her. Like, what is the deal? And he says, hey, our custom, I can't give away the younger daughter in marriage before I give away the older daughter in marriage. Now that I've married off the older daughter, now you can marry Rachel. But you got to work for 7 more years. How many of y'all would have given up at that point? He does not give up because he is in love. So he works 7 more years, finally gets to marry Rachel, and heartbreakingly, Rachel is barren and cannot have a child for Jacob. And so apparently Leah is not barren whatsoever, extremely fruitful, and she begins having babies like crazy. Like left and right, she's spitting out babies, and she's rubbing it in the face of Rachel. I can produce children, you can't. Our husband's probably going to be with me tonight. Like, that's the kind of attitude that she had towards Rachel. And finally, after years and years and years of praying, of striving, Rachel is finally able to conceive. And that baby that was born was Joseph, the first baby from the woman that he had loved all along was Joseph. So that maybe that will paint just a little bit of the picture of why Joseph was viewed as the favorite. Joseph went through 5 different setbacks, and I'm going to go through those fairly quickly. You can write these down as we're going through these there in your message notes. The first setback was growing up in a home where he was rejected and mistreated by his siblings. He grew up in a home where he was rejected and mistreated by his siblings. A lot of this was fueled by the fact that he was the favorite, but he was rejected and mistreated over and over by his siblings. A lot of what I'm going to be reading today is found in Genesis chapter 37. If you brought a Bible with you, feel free to follow along. If you have your phone and you would like to go to these passages of Scripture. But the first passage I'm going to read is Genesis 37 and verses 3 through 5. It says this: Now Jacob loved Joseph more than all of his other children, because Joseph had been born in Jacob's old age. So one day, Jacob gave Joseph a special ornamented robe. And when Joseph's brothers saw that their father loved him more than he loved them, they hated Joseph. And they would not even speak to him or acknowledge him. And when Joseph told his 11 brothers about a great dream that he had from God, they hated him even more. It goes on to say in Genesis 37, starting in verse 18, it says, One day, when Joseph's brothers were out in the fields, they saw Joseph coming toward them from a distance, and they made plans to kill him. That escalated quickly, right? They made plans to kill him. Here comes that dreamer, they exclaimed. Come on, let's kill him. Let's throw him into a deep pit. We can tell our father that a wild animal attacked and ate him. Then we'll see what becomes of his great dreams. Can you see the bitterness, the hatred that his brothers had towards him? He found himself over and over and over in these situations where he was mistreated and rejected by people that he thought genuinely loved him and cared about him. The second setback that Joseph had to deal with was being sold out for money. Joseph was sold out for money. This is unbelievable. After they throw him in the pit to die, then they have this random idea in Genesis 37, starting in verse 26. It says, Now they threw Joseph into the pit. The brothers sat down to eat dinner. But then they saw a caravan of traders passing by, headed for Egypt with camels that were loaded down with spices, balm, and myrrh. Then Judah said to his brothers, We won't gain anything if we just let our brother die in this pit, and we'll all share in a murder cover-up. So why don't we do this? Why don't we sell our brother to these traders? Be honest with me. How many of you have thought about selling a sibling before? Anybody? Anybody? Like they said, why don't we sell him to these traders that are coming by? All the brothers, get this, all the brothers thought this was a great idea. So they sold Joseph for 20 shekels to the traders who took him to Egypt. He was sold for 20 pieces of silver. Some of you have probably thought about doing that with one of your siblings before, selling them for 20 pieces of silver. This is what they did to Joseph, and now he finds himself in a position where the relationship that he thought was there, the love that he thought was there, the care that he thought was there is completely gone because they sold him out for a little bag of silver coins. And although maybe some of you can't necessarily relate to that as much as you relate to being mistreated by siblings, let me maybe put a little bit of perspective to this. See, this happens every day for those of you who may work in the business world. Bosses sell out employees, managers sell out bosses, companies sell out other people. Just about anybody seems to be willing to do whatever it takes, regardless of who it may hurt or who they may crush in the process in order to make another dollar. Divorces happen every day just so that maybe someone or the other can benefit better monetarily than the other party does. People get in debates and fights over custody battles with kids, not because they love the kids, but all because of money in so many different situations. And we see that going on all around us all the time. And maybe that has happened to you before, where you've been sold out so that someone else can make a few extra dollars. Let me tell you this, you're not alone. Joseph knew what that felt like. The third setback that Joseph went through is he was forced to take a job that he did not want. Listen to this. In Genesis chapter 37, verse 36, it says, Meanwhile, in Egypt, the traders sold Joseph to be a slave to Potiphar, a man who was an officer of Pharaoh, the king of Egypt. In a matter of days, Joseph goes from being this pampered son, the favorite of all of his siblings, pampered by his father. In a moment of days, he goes from being that person to now being sold into slavery and now being sold to one specific person, Potiphar, to be a servant in his home. And maybe some of you, at the offset, maybe you don't feel like you can relate to that, but maybe some of you have had to work a job in the past. And you found yourself working that position or working that job all because of what somebody else did. Because they sold me out, I had to go find it. And I didn't want to do this. I'm now maybe cleaning toilets, or I'm changing diapers, or I'm working this job, or I'm flipping burgers and frying fries, or whatever it might be. And I never wanted to be doing this with my life. This is not where I imagined being 10 years ago when I was deciding, where do I want to be in 10 years? It was not here. But because of what they did, I find myself in this position. If that's you today, in the room or watching online, Joseph knows how you feel, because he found himself in the same predicament. The next setback that Joseph went through, the setback number 4, he was being punished for doing the right thing. Joseph was punished not for messing up, not for doing the wrong thing, not for making the wrong decision. He was punished for doing the right thing. Listen to this. In Genesis 39, starting at the back end of verse 6, it says, "Now Joseph was well built and very handsome." It sounds like John Webster. I don't know if he's in the room right now. After a while, his master's wife took notice and began to lust for him. She begged, "Come to bed with me." But Joseph refused, saying, "How could I do such an evil thing and sin against God and my master?" And though she tempted Joseph day after day, he refused to go to bed with her or even be alone with her. But one day, when Joseph was working inside the house, none of the household servants were inside. So Potiphar's wife came up behind him and grabbed Joseph by his tunic, demanding, "Sleep with me right now." But Joseph resisted. He wiggled out of his tunic and he ran outside. And when she saw that she still had his tunic in her hands, she made up this story for the other servants. "Look, the Hebrew slave tried to assault me, but I screamed. So he ran out of the house, but left his tunic here." And when her husband came home, she gave him the same story. Potiphar burned with anger when he heard his wife's accusations. He arrested Joseph on the spot and dragged him off and threw him in the king's prison. Now, some of you can't even imagine being put in this predicament, but here Joseph is, and he does the right thing. He refuses to do anything to defile his master and to defile his God and find himself in bed with this woman that desperately apparently was attracted to him. And he takes off running in the other direction, does the right thing, does what so many men in our culture never would have done. He does the right thing, and because of him doing the right thing, he finds himself being punished for making the right decision. Maybe you've been there before. Maybe you've made the right decision. Maybe you've stepped up and spoken out about something that no one else was maybe brave enough to speak out about. Maybe you brought something to the attention of your boss or your manager or your employer. Maybe you brought something to the attention of your spouse or a friend or whatever it may be, and you were trying to do the right thing. And because of you doing the right thing, you find yourself being hurt, being rejected, being mistreated by other people, all because you made the right decision, all because you did the right thing. This is where Joseph found himself. The 5th setback that Joseph experienced, if you're taking notes today, is being forgotten by people that he helped. Being forgotten by people that he helped. Listen to this. This is in Genesis chapter 40, starting in verse 14. It said, "Joseph said to the king's wine steward, 'When you are freed from prison and restored to your position with Pharaoh, please show me kindness and remember to mention me to the king so that I too can get out of this prison. I was forcibly kidnapped from my homeland, and now I'm stuck in this prison even though I have done nothing to deserve this.' And later in verse 23 it says, 'But the wine steward never gave Joseph another thought.'" He forgot all about him. Maybe you've experienced that before. Maybe you've opened up your home, you've opened up your lives, you've opened up your pocketbooks, and whatever else you could do to help someone else that was in need. And then the moment that you find yourself in need, they are nowhere to be found and they've forgotten all about you. They have moved on. They don't even remember. They don't even recollect. They give you no thanks whatsoever for all the help that you offered them. They've just completely moved on and forgotten all about it. That is where Joseph found himself. Setback after setback after setback after setback. Joseph experienced. But here's here's the thing that blows my mind. Joseph, through all of this, stayed extremely resilient, stayed extremely focused, stayed extremely on target. And I want to dive into a little bit of what I feel the Bible teaches us about the why behind Joseph's resiliency. And I believe that if we can take just a couple of these things and apply them to our life, then no matter what anyone else may do to us, we can have the same resiliency that Joseph did. The first thing that helped Joseph be so resilient, if you're taking notes, number one, he depended on God's presence no matter where he was. He depended on God's presence no matter where he was. The author of the book of Acts in the New Testament, a man by the name of Luke, he writes these words down, speaking of Joseph. He says this in Acts 7, verse 9. It says, Jacob's sons became jealous of their brother Joseph, and they sold him to be a slave in Egypt. This is the story that we just read through. But the Lord was with Joseph and brought him safely through all of his troubles. He depended on God's presence no matter where he was. He knew and understood, whether he could feel him or not, whether he saw him moving or not, whether he understood all the situation and what he was going through or not, he knew, man, God is with me. And I can rest in that. I can have confidence and that I can have trust. And that it says in Genesis 39, verses 1 and 2, now when the slave traders arrived in Egypt, they sold Joseph to a man named Potiphar, who was one of Pharaoh's officials and captain of the palace guard. This next line says it all. The Lord was with Joseph, so he became a successful man. He lived and served in the home of his Egyptian master. The Lord was with Joseph. We see this over and over and over and over, this dependency that Joseph developed upon God's presence to get him through no matter what it was he found himself facing. No matter what anyone else did to him, no matter what anyone else said to him, Joseph was able to persevere. Joseph was able to be resilient and get through every situation and every circumstance because he trusted in God's presence, no matter what he found himself facing. The second thing that made Joseph so resilient, he depended on God's plan and promise, no matter how long it took. He depended on God's plan and promise, no matter how long it took. To give you the short story here, Joseph, he's in the prison, and the person that forgot all about him, the wine steward from just a few moments ago when I was reading through that person that moved on, forgot, they miraculously remembered Joseph in a moment when the lives of so many people in Egypt were in danger because Pharaoh, the most powerful man in the world, leading the most powerful nation in the world at this particular time in world history. The Egyptian empire was massive at this particular time. And Pharaoh, the leader of this nation, has this wild, crazy dream. And he believes with everything in him that this dream means something. That there's something he's supposed to do because of this dream that he has. And so he calls his wise men, he calls so many different officials and leaders and soothsayers and anybody that he can to come try to interpret this dream. But here's what he does to them. He says, I had this dream and it was weird, but I know that if I just tell you the dream that I had and get you to tell me what it means, you can just make up something on the spot, and I'm not going to give you that opportunity. I want you to tell me the dream that I had without me giving you any clues or any hints, and then I want you to tell me exactly what the dream means. And of course, no one in Egypt could pull this off. And he was getting mad. He was getting frustrated. He was saying, if you can't do this, I'm going to have you killed. If you can't tell me my dream and interpret it. And so finally, this wine steward, ding, 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 hey, there's a guy named Joseph in the prison, and he interpreted a dream for me. And it was like spot on, exactly how he said things were going to happen. That is exactly what happened. I think he might be able to interpret your dream too. And so Pharaoh calls for Joseph to come up before him and before his throne. And Pharaoh says to Joseph, hey, I'm going to give you the same opportunity I've given everyone else. I have this dream. I think it means something. I think I'm supposed to do something because of this dream, but I don't know what it means and I don't know what I'm supposed to do. I want you to tell me what I dreamed, and then I want you to tell me what it means and what I'm supposed to do about it. And if you don't, I'm going to have you killed too. Could you imagine that pressure, right? And Joseph looks at him and says, I can't do what you've asked me to do, but God can. And I know that if I depend on him and I call out to him, he'll tell me what you dreamed, Pharaoh, and he'll also tell me what it means. So he goes away and he prays and he comes back and tells Pharaoh, okay, this is what you dreamed. You dreamed that there were 7 fat, healthy, plump cows eating grass by the Nile River in this luscious, green, beautiful grass. And it was just tall, and they're eating, and they're just having just a normal day, just chowing on some grass. I just picture in my mind the Chick-fil-A cows, And all of a sudden, out of nowhere, out of the Nile River, 7 really scraggly, skinny, looks like they're about to die at any moment cows come out of the river, and they devour and eat the 7 healthy cows. This is the dream Pharaoh had, and again, he said it was really weird. Could you imagine Pharaoh's face in this moment as this young Hebrew boy tells him in detail exactly what he dreamed? Like, what would your face look like if this was you and you had this very weird dream and someone told you exactly what you dreamed? This is what Joseph does, and then Joseph says to Pharaoh, this is what the dream means. The 7 healthy cows represent 7 years of plenty. There's going to be 7 years from now until 7 years from now. There's going to be plenty of growth, plenty of rain. The soil is going to produce plenty of crop. The livestock are going to reproduce like they should, and even more so. And there's going to be 7 years of abundance in the land of Egypt. But after that 7 years is over with, there is going to be 7 years of drought. And when that drought comes, it is going to devour the land, and there's not going to be any crops growing because there's going to be no rain. Livestock are going to die because there's not going to be any grain or grass for them to eat. It's going to look like a barren wasteland around here. And so here's what we need to do. We need to save as much as we possibly can during the 7 years of plenty. We need to put aside everything that we can into barns. We need to save wheat. We need to save barley. We need to save corn. We need to save whatever we can save and put it aside and take this 7 years of plenty and use it to our advantage. Because if we do this, then when the 7 years of drought hits, we'll have enough not only to get Egypt through the drought, but we'll have an excess and an abundance where the surrounding nations can come and will profit off of this, because they will be able to, even though they don't have food themselves because of the drought, they will be able to come to Egypt and buy food. And this could save many, many, many lives. And Pharaoh says, man, I don't know anybody else in Egypt that can put a plan together as well as you just put a plan together. I want you to lead this. I want you to take this plan and run with it. I give you all the authority that you need. Here's my signet ring. Here's my robe. Here's my staff. You are now second in command in the most powerful nation in the world. I want you to take this idea that you have and run with it and implement it. And Joseph goes from being a prisoner, and all in a single day, in a moment, he goes from being a prisoner to being second in command of the most powerful nation in the world. And when the famine hits and the surrounding countries are hurting and starving, guess who comes to Egypt to buy food? Joseph's brothers. The ones who mistreated him, the ones who rejected him, the ones that just did all of these horrible things, the ones that thought about killing him, the ones that threw him in the pit, the ones that sold him into slavery. Be honest with me for a moment. If you were in Joseph's shoes, and it was your brothers that did all that to you that were coming and hungry and wanting to buy food, and you're second in command of the most powerful nation in the world, how well are you going to treat your brothers? But yet Joseph responds. And in this moment, the author of Genesis, Moses, he's able to zoom out and give us this big, wide, 30,000-foot view. And he says this, Joseph said to them, and as they're bowing before him in fear, thinking he's about to kill us all because of what we've done to him, once they realize who he is, Joseph said to them, don't be afraid. Am I in the place of God? You intended to harm me, but God intended it for good, to accomplish what is now being done, the saving of many lives. Joseph says, hey, I know what you were trying to hurt me, you were trying to harm me, you were trying to reject me, you seriously thought about killing me, you sold me into slavery, but God used all of those things that you did to me, not as setbacks in my life, but as stepping stones to get me where He needed me to be, so that I could be an instrument that He used and worked through to save an entire nation. And an entire region that surrounded Egypt was saved because of all that Joseph went through. So think about this just for a moment. What would your life look like if you lived life in this way? The third point under what made Joseph so resilient is he depended on God's help in every challenge. He depended on God's help in every challenge. And I know some of you would say, well, man, Chris, that's a Bible story. They're like superhuman. Like that doesn't count. Like, how am I supposed to relate to someone in the Bible? Let me give you a real life story. About 10 months before Hurricane Michael hits, Pastor Marty comes before the staff of Northstar Church. And he says, guys, I don't know why. I don't know the reason behind this, but I just really feel that God is leading me to lead us as a staff to tighten down on things financially. We're not in trouble as a church. We're not doing poorly money-wise, but I just think we need to just tighten things down, only spend what's absolutely necessary, and begin to save and have some margin and some cushion. I don't know why, but I feel like God is leading me to do this. And so we as a staff tighten things down financially. We only spent what was absolutely necessary to accomplish things in our different ministry areas, and we saved and saved and saved and saved. And then literally about a month before the hurricane hit, Marty comes back before the staff, Marty and another guy who was on staff at that time, his name was Lance, and they show us on the board what we were able to save during that time period. And this is what they literally say. In all of our staff meetings, the audio is recorded. I have proof and evidence of this. This is what they said. Because of you and your resilience to save and set aside and follow my leadership and trust my leadership in this, if the worst thing happened, the worst thing imaginable happened, if a Category 5 hurricane hit Panama City and devastated our area, as a church, we would be able to function for 3 to 6 months without taking in a penny because of what you guys have done. And so I just want to thank you guys for doing this and obeying my leadership and trusting that I heard from God on this. 1 month later, a Category 5 hurricane hit Panama City. And because of that, and because of us following Marty's leadership in this moment, we were able to hit the ground running as a church. And 11 days after the storm, we were able to put together an outdoor service at the Panama City campus. And less than that, just a few days after the storm, we were distributing water and tarping roofs and giving out supplies, getting bulk supplies delivered so that we could just pump it out and deliver it into the different communities where our different campuses are located. And we never would have been able to do that if we didn't have the margin to do so. But because of God speaking to our lead pastor, and because of us not just viewing everything as setbacks that we were going through, not, oh man, I can't get bounce houses for the youth group. Like, come on, why do I have to tighten things down? You know, we could have easily begun to nitpick and complain, but no. We believed in our leader, and we believed that he heard from God. And although we don't know all the answers to why a Category 5 hurricane slammed into our community, here's what we do know. We do know that God can be trusted, and we do know that even though travesty happens, tragedy happens, we can sit back and see God working in and through all of it. Would you guys take a moment to bow your heads and pray with me? God, we thank you that you can be trusted. God, we thank you that even though we don't understand the why behind the different things that we've gone through in our life, God, we know that just like Joseph, just like so many others all throughout Scripture, and just like so many real life stories that we have been a part of, stories that we have, stories that others have shared, God, you are an expert at working in and through the bad things that happen in our lives to turn them around for good. I love the promise in Romans 8:28. God, you cause all things to work together for the good for those who love you. And God, I just pray that every person in this room and every person watching online right now, God, that's gone through some rough times, that's gone through some trials, that's been hurt, that's been rejected by people close to them, God, I pray that you would help all of us to view those moments not as setbacks, but as stepping stones as we trust you more and more. with every head still bowed and every eye still closed. Maybe you're in the room today or you're watching online and you would say, man, Chris, I didn't realize that God worked behind the scenes, even in the mess, even in the tough times that I go through, even in the trials that I face, even in the hurt and the pain that I've dealt with as the result of others and what they've done to me. I didn't realize that there's a God that loves me and that He's wanting to work behind the scenes to turn this around for His glory and for my good. I didn't realize that God could be trusted even in the midst of a hurricane devastating a community. But maybe you would say, I want to trust God. Here's what I can assure you. It's not going to make all the bad things go away. It's not going to make the storms just disappear. It's not going to make life just beautiful and amazing and frolicking through the daisy fields. But here's what it will do. Even in the midst of heartache and pain and trouble and tragedy, we can know that there's a God that loves us and that He can be trusted and that He's got a plan. Even though when we don't understand it and we don't see Him moving, we can know that He's working behind the scenes for His glory and for our good. And maybe you're here today and you would like to, maybe for the first time, put your trust in this God that loves you so much. You could do that just by saying a prayer, maybe something like this. Dear Jesus, today I choose to trust You. I don't understand the details of all that I've gone through. I don't understand the why behind every hurt and every pain that I've dealt with in my life thus far. But God, I believe that You are sovereign, that You are in control, and that You can be trusted. And in this moment, I turn my life to You and I place my trust in You. Thank You for sending Your Son Jesus to die on a cross and pay a penalty that I deserved to pay. Help me to trust in You more and more each day. If you just prayed that prayer with me, with every head still bowed and every eye still closed, that is the best decision that you could ever make. And I would love to have the opportunity to pray for you. And so I'm going to ask you to do something very brave and very bold. If you just prayed that prayer with me, could you slip your hand up just to let me know that you prayed with me? Man, hands going up all over the room. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. Thank you so much. If you're watching online, you can click the hand icon directly below me, and Pastor Delbert, your campus pastor, will see your hand. Let me take a moment to pray for all of you. God, thank You so much for moving in this place today and helping more people to trust in You. God, we celebrate that. It's in the name of Jesus that we pray. Amen. Could we take a moment and put our hands together and celebrate those who just gave their lives to Jesus?